Alright, welcome everybody back to the Forge for game development. So excited to kick this year off with you guys, and we're going to start with one of the oldest and best games ever, chess. Now the reason we're going to talk about chess first is because, just like I said, it is one of the oldest games around, and people still play it like mad. You know how we talk about games dying, like, oh, no one plays that anymore, no one plays that anymore? That's never going to be said about chess. That's how good of a game it is. So with a game that good that sticks around that long, it merits us taking a closer look. But aside from going over what chess is all about, I want to make sure we focus on the thing that has ultimate importance in game design, and that's experience. As we start learning about making games and creating worlds and spaces for players to play in, the thing that you always have to keep at the back of your mind at all times is, what experience am I creating for these players? Whenever you play a game, any kind of game too, it could be a sport, it could be a video game, it could be a card game, it could be a social game, you are having an experience. And it's a tailored experience. Someone designed that experience for you. It's so important that even through all the technical and artistic endeavors we're going to go through this year, that you always keep experience at the forefront of everything. You do that, you'll be good. And as the year goes on, I'll give you some strategies about how to always be in the mind of the players so that you can be thinking about the kind of experience that players will have. All right, let's go ahead and jump into chess. For those of you that don't know already, chess is a game where you move pieces in particular ways to try to capture your enemy's pieces. Ultimately, the goal is what's called checkmate, or getting your opponent's king in a place where it has no choice but to be captured. And this is straight from Bobby Fischer, the chess master himself. Never forget that checkmate is always your goal. All right, first let's talk about unit movement. You have 6 different kinds of pieces on your side of the board: the pawn, the rook, the knight, the bishop, your king, and your queen. Let's go over pawns first. Pawns are the simplest piece. They take up the front row when you're starting out. Their movement is always forward. It's always going to be moving forward. And here's the kicker. If you're moving a pawn off what's called home row in the very beginning, the first time you move a pawn off that home row, you can choose to move forward either 2 spaces or 1 space. You have that choice. After you've moved it off a home row, it can only move forward 1 space at a time. Pawns don't capture directly in front of their space, they capture diagonally. So if you want to capture a piece with your pawn, you have to do so diagonally from the square that it's on. But only diagonally forward. You can't capture diagonally back. That's a rookie mistake. The next easiest piece to understand is the rook. These start out in the corners of your board. Rooks can move as many spaces as they want: forward, backward, left, or right, in a big plus sign. Like that. They can't move through pieces. You're either stopping if it's your piece or you're capturing if it's an opponent's piece. Really similar to the rook is the bishop. Okay, the bishop can move as many spaces as he wants in a diagonal. So the bishops are on an X. Consequently, the bishop that starts out on the dark square is always going to be on the dark squares. It's not possible for him to get onto a light square. And the bishop that starts out on the light square is always going to be on the light squares. It's impossible for him to get on a dark square. If you're ever playing a game and you end up with both bishops on the same color, you've done something wrong. I'm going to skip around the pieces here a bit. Let's talk about the queen next. Now the queen is like a combination of a rook and a bishop. She can move as many spaces as she wants diagonally or in a plus sign. Arguably the most powerful piece on your board. Now the king is like a really wimpy version of the queen. It can move in any direction he wants, but only 1 space. Probably the most difficult part about this game is understanding the knight. But once you get it, it's easy. All right, the knight can move in an L shape. So in combinations of 2 spaces and 1 space, or 1 space and 2 spaces. So we can move forward 2 spaces and over to the left or right 1, or we can move to the right 2 spaces and down and up 1, or to the right 1 space and down or up 2, right? There's an L pattern that it makes. And the other thing about the knight is it is the only piece that can move through other pieces. In the very beginning, I can move a knight through my pawn out in front of my home row, or I can move through an enemy piece. But here's the thing, moving through an enemy piece does not capture it. You have to land on the square where the enemy is if you want to capture something with your knight. And that's essentially the rule for capturing with all the pieces. Those are all the basic moves. There's some more advanced moves like en passant. That's my best stab at French. Castling and pawn promotion. Probably the easiest to understand of those is pawn promotion. If you get one of your pawns all the way to the other side of the board, then you can replace it with a bishop, knight, rook, or queen of the same color. You can't have 2 kings, but you can have 2 queens on the board. If you're really interested, you can look up some of those other moves like castling and en passant to try to understand a little bit better. But with what I just told you, you have enough to go ahead and get the game going. And there's something to say about that in terms of experience. If you look back through history, the best games are always easy to understand and difficult to master. If it's too difficult to understand, then people aren't just going to want to play your game anyway. They figure, this is too complicated, If it's too easy to master, then people are going to get bored too quickly. They're going to be like, why waste my time doing this? I know I'm going to rock it, right? There's no challenge. So somewhere there's that sweet spot where you have an easy to learn but difficult to master game, and chess is perhaps the best example of that ever. So if you have a board at home, go ahead and break it out and play with someone at your house, or jump online. There's plenty of places to play online for free. But I can tell you one thing, as a game designer, you will not regret having a good relationship with chess. Next week, we'll talk about theme and how it relates to experience. But have fun playing, and we'll see you next week in the Forge.